The Central Bank of Iraq is doing it again, the same quiet moves, the same strategic silence, the same methodical preparation that preceded every major shift in the country's monetary history. And if you were paying attention last time this happened, you know that everything changed. The question is whether you recognize the pattern now. Let me take you inside what the CBI is doing. On February 10, 2026, Governor Ali Alaq sat down with Rudo and Erbil and delivered the most definitive monetary policy statement of the year. To the casual observer, it sounded like a denial. Alaq stated flatly that the central bank is not studying the topic of changing the exchange rate. He called market speculation great confusion and misplaced. He dismissed any link between the budget deficit and currency adjustment as an incorrect link. But you have to understand what the governor was actually saying. He wasn't denying that change was coming. He was explaining that the change wasn't going to come the way the speculators expected. The exchange rate wasn't going to be adjusted by fight. Instead, the conditions that would make a new exchange rate sustainable were being systematically put in place. Last time this happened, everything changed. Let me remind you of the pattern. In December 2020, Iraq devalued the dinar by approximately 18.5%, moving from 1,180 dinars per dollar to 1,450. Before that move, there were denials. There was quiet preparation. There was a buildup of pressure in the parallel market, and then, when the conditions were right, the adjustment came. In February 2023, they did it again, strengthening the currency by 11.5% back to 1,320, where it remains today. Before that move, the same pattern emerged: official denials, quiet preparation, and then a sudden adjustment when the conditions were right. The playbook is running again, and the evidence is everywhere. Alaq revealed that Iraq's foreign reserves now exceed $100 billion, including more than 76 tons of gold. He disclosed that the money supply stands at approximately 100 trillion dinars, and then he gave us the number that defines the current moment: more than 80% of that money supply exists outside the banking system. 80%. Trillions of dinars circulating in the shadow economy, invisible to tax authorities, unavailable for productive lending, and entirely beyond the reach of monetary policy. Alaq was remarkably candid about the cause, primarily linked to the phenomenon of tax evasion and non-disclosure of revenue levels, profits and income that are achieved, especially in the trade sector. Last time this happened, the CBI didn't have the tools to address this problem. This time, they do. On January 1, 2026, Iraq launched a mandatory advanced customs declaration system for all goods and commodities. The ASYCUDA electronic platform, developed by the United Nations, now requires traders to declare goods before completing financial transfers. When goods arrive at the border, customs officials verify the pre-declared information. This is not a paper system that can be bribed. This is a digital system that tracks everything. Alaq addressed this directly. He said the government's position is clear: applying the tariff, applying the ASYCUDA system, and applying the advanced customs declaration. The government is proceeding with it. He called the measures beneficial beyond fiscal gains. On February 11, the Director General of the Iraqi General Customs Authority announced that the Kurdistan region has begun responding to the unification of customs tariffs with federal border crossing. Advanced understandings are in place to implement the ASYCUDA system across all points of entry. For years, one of the largest leaks in Iraq's financial system was the differential between federal and Kurdistan region customs duties. Traders would import goods through the region, pay lower tariffs, and then smuggle those goods into federal Iraq without paying the difference. The dollars that should have flowed into the central bank's reserves instead flowed into private pockets. That leak is now being sealed. On February 5, Governor Alaq met with U.S. Chargé d'Affaires Joshua Harris in Baghdad. They discussed dollar sales, banking reforms, and ongoing cooperation aimed at strengthening Iraq's financial and monetary stability. Harris praised the significant reform initiatives undertaken by the Central Bank of Iraq and affirmed the United States' full readiness to continue supporting the efforts of the Central Bank of Iraq, enabling it to achieve its goals in enhancing financial and monetary stability. Since November, Iraqi banks have had to comply with SWIFT international transfer system criteria to access their foreign reserves held at the U.S. Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve examines every request, and if there are any suspicions about the final destination, it stops the transfer. Since this mechanism was adopted, about 80% of transfer requests have been blocked due to compliance concerns. 80%. That number keeps appearing. It is the number of currency outside banks. It is the number of transfers blocked. It is the number that defines the gap between the old Iraq and the new. On February 9th, in Erbil, Governor Alaq stood beside Prime Minister Masar Barzani and launched ePsûle, a unified electronic payment platform for the Kurdistan region. Alaq stated, "Everyone now understands that handling transactions with cash alongside complex economic demands is no longer sustainable. Establishing a secure and transparent electronic financial system is essential to restoring citizens' confidence in the banking sector." On February 16th, the central bank issued a directive that further tightens control. They announced that applicable laws do not recognize any discrimination between different editions of the US dollar. Banks must stop treating old bills as less valuable than new ones. This matters because parallel market operators have long used the excuse that they need to charge more for old dollar bills to justify their higher rates. That excuse is now illegal. The official rate for the 2026 budget has been confirmed at 1,300 dinars per dollar, with the CBI purchasing from the Finance Ministry at 1,300, selling to banks at 1,310, and banks offering at 1,320 to traders. This is the framework that has been in effect since February 2023. On the parallel market, the dollar recently traded around 150 to 2,750 to 153,000 dinars per $100 in Baghdad. This gap represents the friction of transition, the premium that the shadow economy demands for operating outside the formal system. But the gap is narrowing, not because the official rate is moving, but because the parallel market is being starved. Last time this happened, everything changed. The pattern is unmistakable. The CBI builds infrastructure, accumulates reserves, tightens controls, denies any change is coming, and then acts when the conditions are right. Alaq explained the philosophy. If we link the topic of changing the exchange rate to the budget deficit, it means we have set a shaky foundation for the future of the national currency in Iraq, he said. Stability is a fundamental condition for achieving economic and investment movement. The CBI is doing it again. The question is whether you are ready for what happens next.